I was 13 when everything went to hell. One night, I woke up to shouting downstairs. Not the usual tension between my dad and brother, this was different. Violent. Ugly. I heard furniture scraping, something glass shatter, then the door slammed so hard the whole house shook. I pressed my face to the window, just in time to see my older brother, Tobe, storming down the street with nothing but a backpack and rage in his steps. He never came back. No goodbye. No explanation. Nothing. The next morning, my mom was quiet. Her eyes looked dimmer. Like a part of her had followed him out the door. My dad just acted like nothing happened. He sat at the table drinking tea like he hadn't torn the night apart. But everything changed. My mom, once warm and soft-spoken, became a shell. She moved like she was underwater. My dad? He got worse. His temper had always been sharp, but now it was constant. I felt like I was walking on glass every day. And I blamed Tobe for all of it. I told myself he was selfish. That he abandoned us. That he broke our home and left us to pick up the pieces. While I stayed behind and watched my mother fade and my father harden, he got to just disappear. I grew up angry. Angry that I was the one left behind. Angry that he didn't even bother to write or call. Even when Mom got sick years later. He didn't show. He didn't even call. So when I was 26, bitter and exhausted, I finally messaged him after over a decade of silence. You ruined everything. His reply came fast. You really don't know, do you? That was the moment everything I believed started to crack. I spent most of my life convinced my brother was a coward. He ran when things got tough. Left me alone with a father who treated anger like it was a personality trait. Left Mom to drown in the quiet sadness that never seemed to lift after he disappeared. When she got sick, we all thought she'd pull through. She was still young. Still strong, or so we thought. But she faded, slowly and painfully. And Tobe? He never came. Not for the hospital visits. Not for the calls. Not even for her funeral. I stood by her grave, shaking with grief and rage. People came and patted my shoulder, whispered, he's probably too broken to face this. But I wasn't interested in their pity for him. All I saw was abandonment. Again. That was the day something hardened in me. Something cold. In my 20s, I started going to therapy. Not for him, for me. I couldn't explain why I had so much rage bottled up inside. Why I kept sabotaging relationships. Why I flinched when voices were raised or doors slammed. One session, my therapist leaned forward and asked gently. Did anything happen in your home growing up that felt off? I scoffed. No. Just a normal family. Strict dad. Quiet mom. But even as I said it, something in my chest twinged. Like I was telling half the truth. That same week, out of nowhere, Tobe messaged me again. No greetings. No emotion. Just a single sentence that hit me like a punch to the ribs. Check Mom's journal. Top of the closet. Behind the shoebox. I didn't even know she kept a journal. But I was already halfway up the attic ladder before I realized I was trembling. I didn't even know my mom kept a journal. It was tucked exactly where Tobe said, behind a dusty old shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. The leather was worn, the pages yellowed and soft like they'd been turned too many times. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up, heart thudding so hard it echoed in my ears. The first few entries were simple thoughts about her day, small joys, mentions of me as a child. But then the tone shifted. The handwriting started to tilt and tremble. There were ink smudges, pages rippled from dried tears. And then I saw him. My father. Through her eyes. She wrote about the things we never saw or chose not to. His cruel words, the way he isolated her from friends, the sudden outbursts behind closed doors. She described how he'd throw things, how she learned to keep her tone soft so he wouldn't snap. And then I saw at the line that made my hands go numb. I don't know how much longer I can keep hiding this from the children. Tobe sees more than I want him to. I blinked at it over and over. Suddenly, so many moments from my childhood started to make sense: why Tobe always stepped between mom and dad during fights, why he seemed angrier than the rest of us. Why he looked tired, too old for his age. And then I turned the page. One sentence shattered everything I thought I knew. Tobe told me he'll take the blame if it means I stay safe. I told him not to. He said he already has. He already has. He took the fall. He made himself the villain in our story so we wouldn't look too closely at the real one. I stared at that journal until my eyes blurred. Until I couldn't breathe. Until I realized the person I hated most might have been the one holding everything together. I didn't wait another day. I picked up the phone and called him. The moment he picked up, I froze. "Tobe?" I said, my voice cracking like glass. "It's me." He was silent for a long second. Then he whispered, "I wondered when you'd call." I didn't even know where to start. All I could say was, "I found Mom's journal." His voice broke instantly. "She said you might one day." What followed was the kind of conversation that reshapes your soul. He told me everything. The night he left, he had walked into the kitchen and found Dad with a fist raised at Mom. Not the first time. But something in him broke. He fought back. He didn't just yell, he hit Dad. Hard. And in that moment, he knew there was no staying anymore. If he remained, Dad would tear all of us apart in retaliation. So he left. Not out of fear. But out of strategy. To take the heat with him. To keep the rest of us in the clear. He told me he lived with guilt every day, not for what he did, but for what we thought he had done. For the anger I carried. For the story I believed. I wanted to come back, he said, his voice shaking, especially when Mom got sick. But Dad threatened to have me arrested. He said if I showed up, he'd make sure it ended badly. I thought if I stayed gone, at least you'd all be safe. I had no words. He took the blame for a storm we never knew was coming. I didn't ruin our family, he said finally, his voice breaking into something between anger and heartbreak. I was trying to keep what little was left safe. I booked a flight the next day. Tobe didn't ask questions. He just sent me his address. When I got there, he was already standing on the porch. Taller than I remembered. A little gray around the edges. But still him. We didn't speak right away. Just stood there, 10 years of silence between us, until finally, I stepped forward and hugged him. Not a casual hug. Not a polite hug. But the kind of hug that wraps itself around every regret. Every misunderstanding. Every "I'm sorry" that never got spoken. He hugged me back. And we both cried. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just the quiet kind of crying that leaks out when your heart finally exhales. We talked that night for hours. About Mom. About Dad. About the things we'd both lost: him from leaving, me from staying. I told him I was sorry. Over and over. And he just kept saying, "It's okay. I never blamed you." But I blamed me. Because for years, I held hatred in my chest for someone who was bleeding in silence. Someone who had taken the fall to protect the rest of us. Someone who never got to explain because I never asked. And sitting there, older, wiser, cracked open by truth, I realized something I think about even now. Sometimes the villain in your story was the hero in the dark, fighting a battle you never saw. I lost time. But I didn't lose my brother. Not anymore.